It was the sound no one was talking about.
Hip-hop was all underground. You had to know somebody to hear hip-hop.
It didn't really have a lot of news coverage. Radio stations were hesitant to play it.
But that was about to change.
MTV opened the doors a little bit.
And then Source magazine pops up out of nowhere.
Back in the day, if you wasn't in the Source Awards, you was not hip-hop.
The teenage white kids out in the suburbs want to know what's going on.
I said, wow, you know, hip-hop is going to be bigger than rock and roll because it's unifying people of all races and backgrounds.
But that power to unify...
It's going to cause people to get killed. It doesn't belong out there.
...can also tear people apart.
I'm your big brother. I will break your big ass down.
Y'all don't love us!
That was the match that lit the stick of dynamite.
Rapper Tupac Shakur has passed away.
Some spoke of an East Coast, West Coast rap war.
I just believe that there's more to the story with Tupac and Biggie's death than meets the eye.
September 7th, 1996, Tupac Shakur, one of hip-hop's most iconic figures, is gunned down on the Las Vegas Strip.
It's a cold, cold day in the rap hip-hop music world.
Tupac's murder and the subsequent murder of his one-time friend, then rival Biggie Smalls, will mark a bloody intermission in the story of hip-hop's rise in influence in the 90s.
You had the two most powerful hip-hop artists that were, you know, basically carrying hip-hop on their backs disappear. It really created a vacuum that led to a lot of changes in the hip-hop culture and the hip-hop industry.
The music was born in the 70s at parties in New York.
You know, hip-hop was an independent art form for a long time. You know, it had a kind of downtown scene in New York. I'm Mark Anthony Neal, James B. Duke Professor of African and African American Studies at Duke University. You obviously weren't hearing it on white radio stations, and black radio stations were really hesitant at the time to play rap music also.
Bro, what's he gonna take?
Their core audience was African-American, middle class, and working class adults. And what they heard when they heard hip-hop was noise.
We've decided to mask or delete 3 words that are heard in a lot of rap records, and they are and
The major record stores, they wouldn't even carry rap. You couldn't get it at Warehouse or Tower Records because they refused to carry it. They're not, you know, that's novelty stuff. My name is Greg Mack, and I created 1580 K-Day, best known as the first 24/7 rap radio station.
Anybody older than 25 in those days really looked down upon rap music and thought it was, you know, trash, or didn't think it would last, didn't take any talent to make rap music.
But 2 rap fans in an unlikely place dedicate themselves to bringing hip-hop music and culture to everyone.
They started to do this magazine out of a dorm room at Harvard, right? At first, folks are like, Harvard, right? And then you see, you know, Dave Mays and John Schechter. It's like, who are these 2 white boys?
My name is Dave Mays, and I am the creator of The Source magazine and The Source Awards. The Source I started between my sophomore and junior years with another white Jewish kid from Philadelphia named John Schechter.
You know, you always have these white folks in the room who are invested in the culture.
I was born and raised in Washington, D.C. I got exposed to black people and black music and culture at a very early age and took a real interest and liking in it. There was absolutely no other reading material or information for this music and culture that was growing and growing.
So Dave and John decide to change that.
It went from 1 sheet to 6 pages to 16 pages. Very early on, somebody mentioned to me that I should read this book about Rolling Stone magazine. And so that became my inspiration. I said, wow, you know, I'm gonna build the Rolling Stone of the hip-hop generation.
And it's a Rolling Stone cover in 1986 featuring Run DMC that marks the moment when everything changes in the music world. That year, the trio releases a version of Aerosmith's Walk This Way.
And that opens up the portal, right? You know, Run DMC sells 10 million copies.
Even the mighty MTV, bastion of rock and pop music, takes notice and responds.
I got a man here that is currently doing a national show called Yo MTV Raps, one of the original people from hip-hop, goes by the name of Fab.
The big thing that happens is when Yo MTV gets created in 1988, you know, first with a weekly show and then a daily show, that was a game changer.
Yo MTV Raps was very instrumental for helping some of those underground artists that were like really good and doing these little baby shows, they was getting airtime. Hey, I'm Bill Bellamy, and I was the VJ of MTV Jams during the 90s. What a blast.
Interviews with rappers and performances on air give America's youth of all races an up-close look at this exploding scene.
MTV opened the doors a little bit, which was bananas for the artists. All these different artists that was like right there, now they are getting airtime. That changed the game for them. So when the doors opened up, MTV was giving a bird's eye view what hip hop was to mainstream America.
I said, wow, you know, hip hop is gonna be bigger than rock and roll because it's unifying people of all races and backgrounds in a way that, you know, no other music has really ever done.
The source starts writing about artists like Eazy-E, whose rhymes describe a very different existence from the one many of its white suburban readers are living. Gangsta rap has arrived, and its brashest voice hails from the streets of South Central LA. NWA's Straight Outta Compton is the first rap LP to get a parental advisory sticker, and its controversial single, The Police, draws the nation's attention.
When NWA came out with F the Police, at first I was like, damn, everything that I've dealt with, they're talking about. Having a Hispanic wife at the time, we were constantly getting pulled over because they thought I was a pimp. So hell yeah, F the Police, you know?
But there are no music videos, there's no radio airplay, and folks are trying to figure out what is this thing now that's on the top of the charts.
The word on the street when it comes to, you know, rap music, it's all word of mouth.
The mom and pop record stores were the place where folks would go regularly to find out what was going on. And then all of a sudden there's the source sitting there. There was absolutely no other information anywhere about hip hop.
The source became this important space early on for folks to be able to find out what was going on in the culture.
NWA proves gangsta rap can cross over to white teenagers who read the source. Straight Outta Compton goes platinum.
People say you got a lot of black people buying your music. No, you don't get to be #1 and platinum and all that with just black people. You got all races, mostly the teenage white kids out in the suburbs because they want to know what's going on.
Hip hop was appealing to people of all races. Whatever you were, if you were young, you were falling in love with hip hop. It was a youth movement.
But the story of police brutality being reported by NWA and the Police is about to hit every news outlet in the world.
So when Rodney King happens, it was just really organic to be able to connect those kinds of dots.
On March 3rd, 1991, 4 members of the Los Angeles Police Department beat an unarmed black man pulled over for a traffic violation. The beating is captured on tape.
Do you have any idea at all how many times you were hit by a club? What do you remember about that aspect of it?
Several times. And then stomps and kicks.
And now police mistreatment of black people, described by NWA's The Police, is being told by every news outlet in the world.
It was one of the first times we saw police brutality against black people on video. I'm Tanya Hart. I'm an entertainment journalist.
The billowing smoke and flames could be seen for miles, an unnerving scene for people driving by.
And it rocked the world, and it rocked LA, and a riot broke out.
And largely in part because of what happens in LA with Rodney King. You know, hip hop matured from a kind of political force that was on the fringes in the 1980s into the best on the ground news reporting of what was happening politically at that point in time.
And for The Source, this was a huge issue. You know, we immediately put together an incredible special edition of the magazine that was in stark contrast to the kind of coverage that you would see in any other kind of mainstream media outlet.
These brothers and sisters who are rapping and telling you stories, these aren't stories as in fables. These are real life. This is reality.
As hip-hop's popularity grows, so does the influence of The Source. The magazine launches its own award show where the line between the violence expressed in the music and the violence playing out in real life will fade away.
I'm in the front row. This is my first Source Awards. Sticky Fingers pulls out a gun, shoots the lights out up the top, puts the gun back in, slam! Dun, 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 dun. I can't slam. I can't slam. Because that's real glass. That means that was a real bullet and it shot the glass out. That's too real for me.
In 1990, The Source sets up offices in New York, filling mailboxes and magazine stands across the country with its glossy pages.
I worked on weekends, I worked late nights. I was, often the first person in the office and the last person to leave. It wasn't long before folks like Chuck D from Public Enemy dubbed The Source the Bible of hip hop in the early 1990s.
I give Mays and Schechter a lot of credit, as the white publishers of a magazine. They had to bring in black journalists, right? And they did that consistently.
We began rating albums on a scale of 1 to 5 mics, and the 5 mics being a hip-hop classic.
If you didn't get 3 mics and up, you should quit. Those mics, for whatever reason, back in the day, you needed 4 or 5, real talk. You wanted 5, but if you got 4 mics, you on to something, right?
It's not 50% of the book, so.
Matty C was the guy who basically ran that unsigned hype column at The Source. He's the one that heard Biggie's demo tape and featured him in the magazine.
The Notorious B.I.G., an up-and-coming rapper from Brooklyn, gets the attention of The Source staff with an impressive demo showing off his easy flow.
You start to look at all of the people whose careers were basically created by The Source. Like having Puffy call me and, when he's starting Bad Boy Records and say he needed, new artists, did I have anybody for him? And, giving Biggie's demo tape to him.
Sean Puffy Combs scouts new talent for Uptown Records when he's not hosting some of New York's best hip-hop parties. But in 1993, he starts his own label with Biggie as one of his first artists.
Check it out. This is my man, the Notorious B.I.G.
What's the deal? What's going on?
Puffy, he understood how to package an artist to make them sell. Hi, my name is Frankie Ross. In the 90s, I was on the radio as an announcer, but I was also a program director. Puffy took Biggie and packaged him and he molded him and turned him into this Notorious B.I.G. that we loved.
The Source helps bring Biggie to the masses, chronicling his rise from local rapper to hip-hop heavyweight. When the Notorious B.I.G. lands his first cover, he's officially deemed the king of New York.
In the early 90s, New York was literally considered to be like the mecca for hip-hop.
But not to hip-hop artists out west like NWA, looking to get their music heard.
And so you got all these West Coast rappers making music, but wasn't getting no airplay.
At first, the rivalry, honestly, was really just about who had the best beats and the best sound.
I've heard different versions of how the riff got started. I do know that New York didn't play West Coast artists.
When NWA's Dr. Dre releases The Chronic, his first solo record, it tops the charts, helped by the video for the single Nothing But a G-Thang. But even The Source is accused of having an East Coast bias when it gives the album a less than perfect score.
The Chronic got 4.5 mics. So, I mean, we knew it was an amazing album, we knew it was incredible, and should have gotten 5 mics.
And when Dr. Dre's protege, Snoop Dogg, releases the record Doggy Style, along with the music video for Who Am I, What's My Name, it introduces gangsta funk, hip-hop with the West Coast twist. The Source gives it high praise, helping to legitimize this new sound.
So when they broke through and artists started coming up from the West Coast and they start saying, yeah, we here now, what? The West Coast ride too. So now it's like even money. We both selling records. We both putting out hits, right? And Death Row Records was synonymous with like the West Coast energy, where we at right now, gangster rap. And we telling it like it is.
Behind the G-Funk movement is LA's Death Row Records, a label that Dr. Dre sets up with Marion Suge Knight.
Suge Knight was definitely a big deal in the 90s. He ruled the world of hip-hop, certainly on the West Coast.
I'm gonna give the people what they want. And what they want is the real stuff that they can feel.
Suge was not a producer. He was not a writer. He was a strong arm. So he was handling business like a gangster, for real. And if you're not playing my records, we gonna make you play them. That kind of energy.
Suge's tactics seem to work. With hip-hop blaring from car windows and boomboxes from New York to LA, The Source launches a grassroots marketing campaign to bring the magazine and its music to the country at large.
The Source van was like the ice cream truck of hip-hop. We would basically send a van around the country to every city, large, medium-sized cities, go into the neighborhoods, pull up outside of record stores, schools, parks, blasting music, and it was like a mobile block party. We would pass out lots of promotional items, CDs or posters, stickers, different things like that.
And while The Source will help introduce hip-hop to Middle America, one West Coast artist will emerge as the voice of a generation.
I think of Tupac as, the most important and influential artist in the history of hip-hop. He was able to reach from the bottom of the streets all the way up to the top of the suburbs, and people followed him.
Everything I ever say, whether it's good or bad, is coming from my heart.
Yeah.
And if it's wrong, then, God ain't finished with me yet. Let him check me.
He was very smart. From the time he was 10 years old, his mom made him read all of the New York Times from cover to cover every single day.
There was just something compelling about his personality, right? That thing that you can't teach, that kind of it factor, Tupac had it.
Tupac, wordplay, passion, purpose, militant, a little bit of crazy, but I liked it. It all worked. His sauce was right.
Yeah, I like to think I'm a rebel. I'm revolutionary.
Despite hailing from different coasts, Biggie hooks up with LA-based Tupac, who becomes both a friend and a mentor.
I remember when we did the Bratz video, Give It To You. He was on set. Him and Big at this time was friends. I never seen nobody smoke this many blunts in 25 minutes of my life, with him and Big together. I'm sitting there probably high as and I don't smoke, but whatever.
As his career soars, Biggie turns to Tupac for advice in navigating the business.
He was a leader, somebody that people respected and listened to. I had a vision, which I think was similar to Tupac's, of how the bigger hip-hop could become. You can make it big and successful, but still keep it authentic and become a force to revolutionize and change the world.
And one of the most powerful players in the music industry, mega producer Quincy Jones, seems to want to help Mays realize his vision.
We get called out to a meeting at Quincy Jones' home in Beverly Hills. We're, whisked from the airport in limousines up into this mansion in the hills. And he says, thank you guys for coming, and, really excited, but I want to let you know what I've decided.
And then Mays lives a line from a Tupac song. Perhaps I was blind to the facts, stabbed in the back. In 1993, as Bill Clinton's inauguration is celebrated with a pop music-filled concert produced by Quincy Jones, America's youth is tuned into a very different sound. Hip-hop is growing, fast, and the 60-year-old Jones wants in on the action.
Quincy is an amazing legend, but at that time, what I gathered from listening to him and other people working for him was he really didn't understand hip-hop and the true kind of DNA of hip-hop.
Quincy reaches out to Dave Mays and his partners to invest in the Source magazine, but when they all meet, it turns out he was not looking for a partner.
And he says, I want to let you know that what I've decided to do is start my own magazine, but I'm prepared to buy you guys out for $600,000 and give you guys all, jobs working for me. And I think some of my partners were actually considering the offer. I was really angry and upset, but, politely turned down the offer.
With the deep pockets of Time Warner backing him, Quincy launches a competitor to the Source, Vibe magazine. The first issue features rapper Snoop Doggy Dogg on the cover.
There were a lot of people that predicted at the time this was going to be the end of the Source. How is this, little independent magazine going to be able to survive?
Vibe was like one of the first commercial magazines, with advertising and just look really slick and really cool artwork. And of course, Source was a little grittier and more street and more hard, more edgy.
Hip hop had become big enough that you could have both a Source and Vibe in the room and not feel as though one or the other, right, had to be the dominant portrait of what's happening in hip hop.
While the Source and Vibe battle it out on newsstands, East Coast and West Coast hip-hop artists also go to war. The one-time friendship between Biggie and Tupac Shakur is an early casualty when they turn against each other. On November 30th, 1994, Tupac is shot while being robbed in the lobby of New York's Quad recording studios. He believes it's a setup by East Coast rivals and points to Biggie and Bad Boy Records' Sean Puffy Combs, who were in the building at the time of his shooting, as somehow being involved.
How are you this morning?
Biggie and Puffy deny any involvement, but Vibe magazine adds fuel to the growing controversy. They send journalist Kevin Powell to interview Tupac, now in prison on sexual assault charges, about the supposed ambush. Powell would later tell Vibe that Tupac had no love for his former friend.
I remember saying to Tupac, why don't you all just come together? And, Pac said something that made me so mad, man. I'll never forget, he said, yellow M&Ms and green M&Ms don't come together.
A few months later, Biggie releases a single titled Who Shot Ya?, imagining himself in the role of a killer. Though the track was recorded months before the Quad studio shooting and doesn't reference Tupac, none of that seems to matter. Tupac takes it as a direct attack.
It was very serious. These guys were very serious. Well, here's the thing. When you are talking about the streets, if you're living that hip-hop life, you're around people living that world, there's gonna be some things.
With bicoastal tensions simmering, the Source hopes to lower the temperature by bringing the community together in a celebration of the music. The first televised Source Awards is held at Madison Square Garden's Paramount Theater.
95 is the kind of most famous Source Awards. Of course, everybody remembers those tense moments where Suge Knight got on stage in front of an audience of 5,000 people in New York City and basically took a shot at Bad Boy and at Puffy.
Suge mocks Puffy for inserting himself into the songs and videos of Bad Boy's artists.
Any artists out there want to be an artist and want to stay a star, don't want to have to worry about the executive producer trying to be all in the videos, all on the record, dancing. Come to Death Row.
It got like personal right there. Diddy was synonymous with New York, like partying, having a good time, putting my artists on, being in the videos, having fun. West Coast was like, nah, we don't do all that. We real out here, right?
Targeting Diddy in that moment, I would say arguably has nothing to do with hip hop, right? It just has everything to do with these two personalities clashing over who was gonna have a dominant cultural footprint.
Dr. Dre!
Tensions escalate when Snoop Dogg calls out the East Coast audience for not respecting the West.
The East Coast ain't got no love for Dr. Dre and Snoop Dogg and Death Row. Y'all don't love us. Y'all don't love us.
Lines got drawn and sides kind of were taken, and a rivalry developed between two camps, two labels, the Bad Boy camp and the Death Row camp. And then the rivalry between Suge and Puffy. It caused a lot of tension and a lot of uproar. But there was no violence that night. There wasn't even, a punch thrown.
That was the match that lit the stick of dynamite to me.
What we saw was these wars, literal wars, shootouts between the East Coast and the West Coast.
As rap music surges to the top of the charts, politicians become its most outspoken critics.
This is frankly offensive to me, and I think to any parent, it is nothing but filth.
It's negative. It's in the wrong direction. It's going to cause people to get killed. It doesn't belong out there.
It's a type of music that can bump somebody up to the point where they have total hatred.
And so you think about this in terms of a political context, right? This is the era of Bill Clinton's infamous crime bill.
Let us roll up our sleeves to roll back this awful tide of violence and reduce crime in our country.
Under the Clinton administration, the 1994 Violent Crime Control and Law Enforcement Act results in longer and harsher prison sentences.
And the crime bill was a response to perception to rising crime rates and this fear of black youth that were out of control.
I know when you're home and when you're not.
Suddenly you're seeing all these commercials for home security systems.
24 hours a day.
At the same time that white Americans are looking at these images, they're watching television shows like Cops, which double down on black criminality. So black men are seen as both prey and threat.
Before blogs and social media, print magazines dictate the story. But while the source preaches the positive messages in rap, their competitor, Quincy Jones's Vibe magazine, wallows in the East versus West clashes.
The media fed into it a little bit. You know what I mean? They leaned into it, and so it fueled the flames. So people were, curating this narrative of, is there a division? Who's better? Is there hip hop any less or more hip hop than New York hip hop? So they created a movie in a movie. And unfortunately, some of the artists got hurt by it. People lost their lives over it.
The story's been told many times with, about Vibe and the covers and the stories they printed that people have felt, contributed to sensationalizing and fueling that beef in a way.
Like its February '96 cover, Live from Death Row.
The way corporations, whether radio stations or magazines, invested in the East Coast, West Coast battle, contributed to that moment, as did a celebrity culture.
These kinds of problems are still something that's very much in the sphere of the lives that these rappers are living.
They were making these guys believe that they were like serious gangsters. They weren't really serious gangsters, not really.
Sensing things spinning out of control, Quincy Jones holds the Vibe Summit in New York. In attendance are Suge Knight and Dr. Dre, Puffy and Biggie. In contrast to his magazine, Jones preaches taking hip-hop in a more positive direction. But the summit proves to be too little, too late. Tupac releases Hit 'Em Up, a diss track aimed at Puffy's Bad Boy crew. In the song, he claims to have slept with Biggie's estranged wife, singer Faith Evans. In another interview with Vibe, Tupac continues to lash out at Biggie when he talks about schooling his one-time protege.
I'm just mad at my little brother when he don't respect me. Now, when you don't respect me, I'm gonna spank your ass. I don't give a how rich you got on the block. I'm your big brother. I will break your big ass down.
I believe in that last period of his life, he made some very aggressive and violent music. And again, that's a lot of what people unfortunately remember him for. But if you listen to a lot of his other music and you listen to the powerful messages and ideas that he conveyed for many years through his music and his lyrics, he was a revolutionary.
The East Coast-West Coast tensions boil over at the '96 Soul Train Awards, forcing host Don Cornelius to get involved.
My assistant said Tupac and Biggie are in the parking lot and they're circling around each other brandishing guns. And I went and got Don Cornelius and said, Don, you better come out here and put this out because I don't know what these brothers are gonna do.
The Source did a cover during the middle of this with Suge Knight. It ain't no East Coast, West Coast thing. I was very cognizant that a street kind of beef was coming into the industry, you know, with gang members and other people involved. So we went out of our way to get Suge to talk and to say that and to put that on the front cover of the magazine.
I saw Tupac probably a month or two before he was killed. And I said, hey man, what's up, blah, 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 because we knew each other. But he just had a look. Everything that he had dealt with in life, he just had that look. It wasn't the same glowing eyes that I had seen.
On the night of September 7th, 1996, after attending a boxing match at the MGM Grand in Las Vegas, Tupac Shakur is critically wounded in a drive-by shooting. 6 days later, he dies in the hospital.
It hurt, of course it hurt. Anytime one of my kids, because that's why I look at him, die, for whatever reason, it hurts.
I would have loved to see Tupac's evolution. I mean, he only 25, 26 years old. I mean, what would he have been at 30? He'd be 40-something now. So, you know, I always got like love in there, you know, it's tough.
It was an awful feeling when I heard that he had passed. You know, of course, immediately we had to change the plans for the magazine and put together, you know, a whole tribute package about him. You know, you wanted to make sure that you did an amazing job for him in, you know, commemorating who he was and what his contributions were.
In the months following Tupac's death, theories abound on who pulled the trigger. All eyes land on Bad Boy's East Coast crew, but Tupac's murderer remains at large.
I think it's really sad, too, that there's no one out there, or the claim is no one out there saw anything. I think that somebody saw something, and they should most definitely come forth and say something.
For Biggie, it's a sign that it's time to put the rap beefs behind him.
It's time to be forgiven.
Right.
But the realization comes too late.
In case you haven't heard, it's been all over the media, all over the news. Rapper Tupac Shakur has passed away.
Today, hundreds line the streets outside a Nation of Islam school to pay their respects to the slain rapper.
I'm just here to show my respect for Tupac. My brother was a good brother.
His words really give us strength to keep on moving and look forward to another day.
There's still a lot of negativity out here, and the violence is going to take more than just Tupac's death to stop.
I still don't think people's going to learn from it. I still think a lot of stuff is going to go on, a lot of killing, a lot of violence still. They're not going to learn nothing.
While the hip-hop world is still reeling from the death of Tupac Shakur, another is soon to follow.
The night Biggie was shot, Again, it was another Soul Train party. I was excited because we were going to be at the same table with Sean Combs, with P. Diddy. But for some reason, my husband said that night, no, I don't think we should go. Really strange that night, and he was insistent that we do not go.
6 months after Tupac's death, 24-year-old Notorious B.I.G. is murdered in a drive-by, gunned down after a Soul Train party in Los Angeles.
The rapper's car was riddled with bullets, leaving him so badly wounded that he was pronounced dead at the nearby Cedars-Sinai Hospital.
I don't know if people love Big everywhere, but New York took a L on that. Like, Big meant so much to people. You felt the pain of a funeral of, like, Mandela. To see people on the ground crying and stuff, you like, damn, it was big to people.
I would want him to be remembered as one of the most talented and gifted artists of his time.
To the hip-hop community, it was a big loss because he was like one of the best artists that, you know, ever rapped or was ever in hip-hop.
He was a good man. He was a generous man.
It's a sad day. It's a sad day.
Another devastating loss, and the blame game continues.
There are questions whether Biggie's murder may have been retaliation for the drive-by slaying of his arch-rival, California rapper Tupac Shakur.
Some spoke of an East Coast, West Coast rap war.
So this is another round fired in this war of the rappers?
Well, we hope that we're not getting into that situation. This is a very tragic event. It has similarities to another shooting, but there were a lot of people that were in the area, and we're hopeful that someone would come forward and give us information so that we can close this case.
It might not have to do with Death Row and Bad Boy, but, you know, it got to do with East Coast, West Coast, for sure, yeah.
Hopefully, this isn't anything that has to do with East Coast, West Coast.
People looked at Biggie being shot. It was retaliation for Tupac. So, everybody was guessing. I don't know.
And then again, we look back at that, they never found the person who killed him either. What's that all about?
We here with him. You understand what I'm saying? We gonna carry on his legacy regardless. You understand what I'm saying? After the cameras and everything is gone, we carrying it on because we live this life after death. We make that life after death happen.
As fans mourn, they turn away from the headlines and find another way to celebrate their heroes.
You could feel the impact that it had on people here in LA. Murals started going up with Pac and, you know, the brothers on the corners selling T-shirts.
And immediately, right, you start to see these ghetto art depictions of Biggie and Tupac. And the way that we romanticize about them in death has a lot to do with the role that they played in the lives of young people at that time.
This artist says his crew is trying to convey a serious message.
The message behind it is one coast, one culture. Stop the violence.
Two of hip-hop's biggest stars dead, the music eclipsed by a sensational story. In the aftermath of the two rappers' deaths, hip-hop insiders point the finger at Vibe magazine for fueling the ongoing war between Tupac and Biggie.
That East-West crap, Vibe has to take a lot of, they should have got a bullet.
Wow.
They should have got a bullet.
In a tribute to Biggie, the source asked the question on everyone's mind: how can hip-hop move past the violence?
I don't understand this. You know, I just don't understand it. I mean, this is a beautiful guy that got killed over nothing, really.
I don't think either the death of Tupac or Biggie was the result of street violence and street rivalries. That's, again, another myth that I believe has been painted for people to try to make people think about rap music in a very negative way.
Dave Mays has his own ideas about who was really behind the killings of hip-hop's two biggest stars.
In my opinion, there was other forces at play that became evident, you know, over time, years later.
As a founder of The Source magazine, Dave Mays was an eyewitness to the rise of hip-hop and the fall of two of its brightest lights. He has his own theories on who killed Tupac and Biggie.
You know, hip-hop was a very powerful force in mobilizing and empowering, the Black community and unifying a lot of other people. And, I believe that, very early on, it became a threat similar to the way Black power movements in the 60s were viewed by the government. So I just believe there also was an element of government and law enforcement, infiltration and involvement. The same thing we've all learned over the years about what happened in the 60s with COINTELPRO.
The source still tracks what's happening in the world of hip-hop, including the closing of West Coast-based Death Row Records after Suge Knight is sent to prison on assault charges. The magazine also documented the many hits released by East Coast-based Bad Boy Records, including the song and video for I'll Be Missing You, a tribute to Biggie. And while Mays left the source in 2006, the magazine continues its mission and remains the longest-running voice in hip-hop journalism.
I don't think hip-hop has ever died. I think that's the beauty of it, is that hip-hop will never die.
Rap music is getting to a point where everybody has beefs with each other, and it's just getting to a point where it's getting out of hand.
I think that hip-hop learned a valuable lesson after Big and Tupac's death. We're all doing the same thing, trying to, feed our families. We're trying to make hit records. We're trying to blow up.
You never had a problem. You're just speaking about it now because enough is enough.
If the East-West thing would have kept going, it would have just got worse and worse. So I think that just said, wait, stop, reset, woosah, let's go forward.
After Biggie and Pac died, what did happen was you started seeing women get into hip-hop. You'd see the Mary J. Bliges and you'd see all the Lil' Kims, and women were finally invited to the party. And it was really time because, of course, women always have a lot to say and we're usually good at it.
The beef that we saw with Tupac and Biggie, which was a centerpiece of so much of the culture in the 1990s, would be a passing Twitter beef today.
But many of the systemic issues that 90s hip-hop gave voice to in its lyrics continue to plague American society today.
I was telling Ice Cube recently how proud I was of him, writing that song. If you really go back and listen to the stuff he was writing back then, and it's like, oh, wow, this is still going on. There's nothing wrong with a party record here and there, but hopefully somebody will get off of the bling and talk about something that's going on in the world, but it makes it interesting.
Hip-hop can be that force that finally rids this country and this world of racism and systemic racism, and unifies people, levels the playing field. Hip-hop still has the power to do that.
I think what the 90s did was bring the power of television and social justice in a way that was in your face and in your living room. But we can look back at that and learn many, many lessons about where and how we should move forward. I do have hope that somehow we will be able to all get along, just like Rodney King said. We will get along.